In this tutorial, we are going to use SQLite database in a .NET MAUI application. So that .NET MAUI is a cross-platform app development framework from Microsoft, where you can create apps for iOS, Android, etc. So here's the contents of this tutorial. First, a short introduction, then a short overview of SQLite database system, then how we can use SQLite in .NET MAUI, and then we will create a basic app, a basic user app with so-called CRUD functionality, where we are going to create and insert some data into this SQLite database. We are going to read the data from the SQLite database, and we are going to update data in the database, and finally delete some data in the database. So first, a short introduction. So .NET MAUI, as mentioned, is a multi-platform or cross-platform development framework for creating apps for Android, iOS, Windows, and macOS. And you use Visual Studio and the C# programming language. So mainly you will prefer to use Visual Studio, but you can also use Visual Studio Code because there is a .NET MAUI extension for Visual Studio Code. In order to start using this .NET MAUI framework in Visual Studio, make sure to install this .NET MAUI workload as part of the installation. So when you have installed this .NET MAUI as part of Visual Studio, you should get access to this .NET MAUI app template that you should use in order to create a .NET MAUI app in Visual Studio. So what basically is SQLite? Actually, it's a very small or miniature database that has the same functionality as ordinary SQL databases, such as SQL Server from Microsoft, MySQL, PostgreSQL, etc. And since it's a very small size, it is basically just a file on the so all the entire database is just stored in a simple file, and it has a small size and it's perfect for apps on your smartphones. In order to get more information, you can go to the homepage and also take a look at the Wikipedia site to get more information about the SQLite database. And since this SQLite database is so small, it's the default choice when you want to integrate an SQL database in your apps. And if you want to use SQLite in the .NET MAUI application framework, you can use or install this Microsoft.data.SQLite package. Basically, you just install this as a NuGet package when you have created a new project in a new .NET MAUI project in Visual Studio. You just go to the NuGet package, search for Microsoft.data.SQLite in order to install this package, and then you are ready to start communicating with a SQLite database, and you can start inserting data, update data, retrieve data, and delete data. So let's see how we can create a basic app in .NET MAUI that communicates with this SQLite database, and it has basic CRUD functionality. So we will create a basic, I call it user app in .NET MAUI that communicates with this SQLite database, and that basic application are going to create or insert data into the database. So basically we are going to here, in this case, enter a username, click the save button, and that user will be saved into the SQLite database. And also you can click on here, get users, in order to retrieve or read data that are stored in the database. And also, if you select one of these items in the list here and click update, then you will also be able to update this user information in the database. And finally, if you click on the delete user, you are going to delete that specific user in the database. So now I have opened my local Visual Studio. Then I just select this .NET MAUI app template, click next, specify a proper name. I can call it user app or whatever, and then specify proper location. I just put it in a temporary folder here on my hard drive like this. Click next, and click next in order to create this project in Visual Studio Code. No, sorry, in Visual Studio. So after a few seconds, this user app project has been created here in Visual Studio, and then the first thing we need to install this NuGet package. So then basically just right click here, manage NuGet packages, and then just go to browse and search for this package, which was Microsoft data.SQLite here, and then just click on this package and install it, and then you're ready to start using this SQLite database in your .NET MAUI application. So just accept here and just wait a few seconds in order to install this package. And then you see this package has been installed, and you can also go here under the different platforms. I will focus on Android, and here you see also here under dependencies .NET for Android packages, and then you see this Microsoft.data.SQLite has been installed. So now you are ready to start creating the necessary code for your application in order to communicate and interact with this SQLite database. So in this default template, you have this main page.xaml, which is the place you are creating your graphical user interface, and then you have the code behind file, main page.xaml.cs, which is the code behind where you create the C# code. And then I start to create some C# code. So this is the basic template. I just delete the stuff from the template that you don't need anymore. The first thing you need to do is to create or specify the path where the database should be stored. So then you can create here on top of this default class, create a path for your SQLite database. I just create a private read only a string, and I can call it db path or something. Just here. So typically the database needs to be stored in this default app data directly as part of your Android platform or your iOS platform. So typically you cannot put this database wherever you like. Typically it needs to be in this app data directly. And here you specify the name of the database. You can call it whatever you like. I just call it app db or something. So then you have created the path for the database, and then I need to create a connection string, and then I just use private also here read only, because this is information that you are not going to change, string, and I just define this connection string like this. And here in the constructor I can just use this connection string like this. So then connection string equals to data source, and then we have this path to the database, which is created here. So then next, typically I can create a separate method. I can call it public void, and then here you get some default code for the that is suggested by the IntelliSense and the artificial intelligence option. So then I just use that one as a starting point like this. So then this code is generated, and I just modify it to make it suit my needs. So then I just can create a method called create database like this. And here I create the connection to the database like this. Here I open the connection to the database, and here I basically create a simple database. I can call it user in my case. It has two columns. It could be a user ID, which is an integer, and also the primary key, and it's also auto incremented. And then you have the username itself, which is basically just a text column like this. So basically we create a simple database that we are going to store these users, which has two columns, username and username. Then this one can be deleted like this. Table command, I just call it command, and the same here. And then these final command .execute are actually execute this query in order to insert or create this database table into the SQLite database. And you see I get some error there because it doesn't find the namespace. So basically here on top I can just use using Microsoft .data and this SQLite like this. So now I included this namespace here on top, and then I created this basic code like this in order to create a connection and open the connection to the database, and then we just create a simple query to create a basic table, in our case called user, with username and user ID and username, and then we just insert that query into the database in order to create that specific table. And since typically we want to create this database and we start applications, I just put it here in the constructor like this. So basically this is the necessary code in order to create an SQLite database and connect to the database and create a basic table that we are going to use later. So far we have created a .NET MAUI project in Visual Studio. We have installed the necessary NuGet package, and we have also created the code in order to connect to the database and create a basic table inside this SQLite database. So next now is to start creating this CRUD functionality, and then we start with the create, which is part of the CRUD, create or insert data into the SQLite database. So we are back in Visual Studio, and we have this main page .xaml.cs, which is the code behind file where we create the C# code. And we have created a method called create database, and now let's create a method for inserting some data into the database. So then you can call it public void, and you can call it insert user or something, and then you see this, it suggests this code. So then just use this code as a starting point, and then you have the connection string here. We open the connection to the database, and then we create a command, and then here we just specify a basic insert statement. So insert into user username, and then the user name here, that is part of the input to this insert user. So then we will use this insert user method later another place in our code. But basically that's the code that we need to create in order to insert a user username into the SQLite database, into the table called user in this case. So now we have created a method in C# for inserting data into the database, and now we need to create some user interface. So here is the first draft of the user interface. We have basically just a text box, or entry as it's called in .NET MAUI. And then, so this text box is this part of the call, basically an entry with a name. I call it just username entry or something. And then a button. So when you enter a name here, click on this save user button. You will go to this insert user method in order to insert the data into the database. So let's create this basic user interface in this main page.xaml file and hook it up on this insert user method that we just created. So then I open this main page.xaml, which is the file we are going to create the user interface. So this is the default from the template. It has some image that we don't need, and it has some labels, buttons, etc. So we can use that one as a starting point. like this. So instead of a label, we need to use this entry, and it need to specify name. Then we just use x name like this. So name, I call it username entry or something. Then we just delete all this stuff. That's just a basic entry or a text box. And then we need to have a button. So this is the default button created by the template. I can just change it to I don't need a name for this button, so I just have a text save or save user or something. I just delete all the code that we don't need, like this. And then when you click on this button, we need to go to an event handler. I can call it on save user clicked or something. So then we have created the necessary user interface object, a text entry and a button. And when we click on this button, we want to go to this event handler. So basically now I can just right click here on this event handler and go to definition in order to create that event handler in the code behind file, which is created here. So the first thing I need to do is to get this username from this text entry, so that I can just create a variable, something like this, or name equals to this text box which has this name, username entry, which I specify here. So username entry dot text. So this gets the text that you write in the username field or text entry field and put it into this variable. And then basically I can call this method insert user like this. So insert user and this name like this. I can change it to username or something to get it more specific. This and a semicolon. So basically that's all you need. Of course you can improve the code, make it more robust, etc. But basically that's all you need. You get the name that the user enter in the entry field, put it into a variable, and then just call this insert user method like this. And then when you call this one, this code will be executed, and this code will insert this user into the user table like this. So let's just run this application. I want to test it on the Android emulator, so then I just select Android emulators and just use this one of these default ones. I just select this one and click on the run button in order to open the application in the Android emulator. So after a while this Android emulator pops up, and here you see the user interface that we have created. Just an entry here where you can create a username. So then I'll just type a username, Hans or something, and then you can click on this button, save user, and then that's it. Now this user that we has created here has been saved in this SQLite database. We don't see the result, but in the next part of this tutorial we will make a list here where we will see or retrieve the usernames that has been stored in the database. But basically this is a basic user interface with a text entry and a button in order to save this specific information into the SQLite database. So far we have been able to create or insert data into the SQLite database, and the next step is to be able to retrieve or read some data from the database. So let's go to this read part of the CRUD operation. Then the first thing we need to do is to create a method called getUser or something in order to be able to retrieve a list of users that are stored in the database. So basically select username from user and just retrieve all these usernames that are stored in the database into a list like this. So we will start by creating this getUsers method, and then next we will update the user interface with a new button called getUsers. And then when you click on the getUsers, the list from the database should be presented below the button using a so-called collection view in .NET MAUI. So then let's start to create this getUsers method. So here in the bottom of this main page.xaml.cs file, start creating this method. I can call it it's a public. And here we should return a list of users. And then this list should be a string like this. And then we get some auto-generated code, which you can use as a starting point. So then we should retrieve a list of strings with users. I can call the method get users in my case. Here we connect and open the database. I put this code on top here, and then we create a list of users like this, and then we create a command with the necessary query, select username from user like this, and then we use a while loop in order to create this list of users that you retrieve from the database. And then basically just retrieve this list. Here return users, which is this list of strings, which is a list of users like this. So basically that's the necessary code to retrieve the users that are stored in the database. Basically select username from users like this, and then we put it into this list and return it as part of the function or method like this. That's the getUsers method. Next we need to update the user interface. So we need to go back to this main page.xaml in order to improve or update the necessary parts of the user interface. So we start to create a new button. So then I can basically just copy this button to use it as a starting point. Like this. Copy it once more. Like this. And then the text here should be get users or something. And then when I click on it, we need to create an event handler on call it on load users clicked or something. That's the button. And now we need, when you click on this button, we should call this method that we created, get users, and then the list should be presented here in a collection view. So then I just use this collection view, which is part of .NET MAUI, like this. Then it's generate this default code that we just need to improve. So then basically we end up with this collection view. We have a name for it. I call it just users collection view. And then we have this label where I'm going to create this list of users and present it on the user interface on this app. And then when you click on this button, get users, then we'll call this onLoad users clicked event handler in order to retrieve the list of users from the database and present it inside this collection view. So then in order to create this event handler, I just right click on it and go to definition, and it will be created here automatically in this code behind file main page .xaml.cs. Basically all we need to do here is just to get this collection collection view. So I just, which has this name, I just copy it like this, and then I just specify the source, which is basically just this method get users like this. So it should be or could be as simple as that in order to retrieve a list of users into this collection view. And also need to include this items source, this one, like this. Then that's the name of the collection view, dot item source, and then I'll just specify which method that should be called in order to fill this collection view. So basically that's all you need. So let's now go to here and open or start the application and see what's happening. So this is the updated app. We here can create a username. Just create one more, save user, and then I need to click on this button, get users, and then you see I'll get a list of users that has been created in the database like this. So if I create a new one, whatever, click save here, but in order to see it here in the list I need to click on this button. Typically I also want to update the list automatically when I click on this save user button. So then let's go back to the code, and then I can also use this one and put it into on save user here. I can just also include it here. Now I can just click on here on auto reload, and then hopefully it will work. So then I will just type here something here now. Just create a new name that doesn't exist already. Arnold or something, and I click here, and you see it's automatically updates the list because I have put this line of code into this one on save user clicked event handler like this. But I can also click here to get users to also update the list manually like this. So basically know how created both the create part of the CRUD functionality and the read part of the CRUD functionality. So next now is to create the update part of the CRUD functionality. So before we start creating the update part of the CRUD operation, our code has now become quite big. Typically we want to improve the code structure because here in the main page.xaml.cs we have both the event handlers and we have our code that communicates with the database, create the database, insert user, and get users like this. Typically want to separate the event handlers and the code that is communicating with the database. So typically want to put this code, this piece of the code, into a separate class or something. So then I just go here on the project, click add. I can create a new folder. I can create a folder classes, or typically I prefer models. Here and inside this new folder I just add new item and then select class, and then I just create a new class. A good name could be users DB for short for database or something. Click add, and then an empty class has been created here for us. So now typically we can start by go back here to this code behind file and then basically just copy these three methods here and put it into the class like this. So then we have the foundation for the class. So now we have create database, insert user, and get users here as part of this new class called users DB. Also, I guess we also need this part of the code, these variables for the path, connection string, etc. So I also just copy that one. Later I will just delete it here. But I put it in here. Typically also want to create a constructor like this. So a constructor is a piece of code that is started automatically when you initialize this class. So you have this this one and the connection string, and then we create the connection string here as part of the constructor, and then also we want to create the database itself. We can put the code for that also as part of the constructor like this. And since this users DB class will be used now here in the code behind file, we also need to set it to public. So it's a public class, and here we have the constructor that actually is calling this create database, which is here. And since this is only used inside the constructor, we can set this to be private instead of public like this, while these methods insert user and get users will be called outside the class and they need to be public like this. So basically now we have created the necessary code for where we have put all the code that handles or deals with the communication of the SQLite database into this separate class like this. Those are not needed. We can remove those, and now this class should be ready. Now we can go back to the code behind file. Basically we just need and delete whatever we don't need here anymore. This one is no longer needed. The connection string and the create database has been moved to this separate class, and also this one is now part of this users DB class. So basically we end up with this code behind file. Here we have these two event handlers, one for saving the data and one for retrieving the data like this. And also we need to and since those methods now, this insert user and get users are part of this class, we just need to use it here using user app dot models, because we are named the folder models like this. So now we can get access to these methods that we create here in this code behind file. But the next thing we need to do is to actually use that class to initialize that class as part of this code. I can put it here on top of this method. I can just type private read only users DB new user DB like this. And then basically I just need to use this object of that specific class here for get users. So users DB dot and the name of the method, the same here and the same here. But basically that should be it. Of course I need to have a semicolon here. And now we have put all the code that deals with the database operation into a separate class. We only leave the event handlers here in the code behind file, and then we create an object of that specific class, and then we use the different methods in this users DB class, insert user, get users, like this. Basically now we have updated the code and the code structure, but the user interface and the behavior should be the same. So let's just open the application and see if it works in the same manner as previously. So here you see the user interface. I click get users to get the list of users that are stored in the database. I can create a new one, test or something, save user, and you see it pops up here in the list. So basically the application works in the same manner as before, but we have just improved the code structure, putting most of the code that deals with the database into a separate class, etc. So now that we have improved the code structure, we are ready to start on the next step of this CRUD operation. So let's start with this update and update a specific user in the database. So typically we need to improve the user interface. Typically here in this list where we was only retrieving the username, we also typically want to retrieve the user ID, because the user ID is the primary key in this user table, and typically we need to use the primary key in order to update the data in the database. So we need to update this collection view and also show or retrieve the user IDs as well. So in order to do that, we can create a new method in our new class, usersdb.cs. We can call it getUsersFull or something. It's very similar to the previous getUsers, but here we need to also get the user ID and the username. And we need, since we are now retrieving more than one items from the database, we cannot just retrieve a list of strings. We now need to retrieve a class. So here we need to create a list of users, where users are now a new class that we need to create that contains of the user ID and the username like this. Let's create this new class and create this getUsersFull method as part of our code. So that's the new class we need to create. We can of course right click here and create a new class, or I can just create as part of this file, because one class file can create multiple classes. So just for simplicity, I just create on top here. So public class, and I can just call it user like this. And it contains basically just of the user ID and the username like this. I can just set it to something like this, a semicolon of course. So basically this usersdb.cs now consists of two classes, one user class and one userdb class, which is the same as previously. And now we want to create a new getUsersFull. Of course I can just change this one, but I just make a copy of it like this, and then I call it getUsersFull like this. And instead of returning a list of strings, we are going to return a list of users like this. And then select username. I also want to include this user ID, comma, username from users like this. And then we have the user name here. Use like this. We also need to include the user ID as well. Instead of string here, we also need to change it to user like this. And then instead of only retrieving a username, we also need to include the user ID as well, like this. Remove this one. So basically that's the new method for retrieving both the user ID and the username and return it as a list of users like this. So then select user ID, username from user, and then we just inside this while loop add one record at a time, user ID and username, and put it into a list of users that we return as part of the method, and we are going to use that method in our code behind file. But before we can use that one, we need to update the user interface as well. So let's go to this main page.xaml file, and now we need to update this collection view, not only showing the username, we also need to include the user ID here. So we need to update this collection view. To save some time, I just copy some pre-made code in order to save some time. So basically the main change here now is how two labels, one for the user ID and one for the username. So that's the main difference here, and I put these two labels into a grid like this. So that's the one thing, and then we need to go to our code behind file. Instead of get users, we need to get users full, which is this new method that we created that both return the user ID and the username like this. So use this one instead, and the same here, get users full like this. That's so far the only thing we need to do. So let's just run the application and see what's happening. So hopefully it works as expected. Here we can still enter these new users and click save, but let's see what's happening when you click get users. And then you see we get a list of users, but in addition to the usernames, we also get the user IDs like this. And now we haven't created the code yet, but now we can create different elements here. And then we need to create some code to update that specific selection. So I guess there are many ways to do this, but one simple way just to illustrate the principle. When I click here on one of these existing users, I want to have some new entries here below. One entry that is showing the selected user ID and one entry that is showing the selected username here. And then we also want to have a new button called update user or something. So let's just update the user interface with these new things. So then I go to the main page.xaml, and then below this collection view, I just create a new entry. Sorry. Like this. New user name, something like this. So then we have a text entry for the selected user ID. I just set it also to read only is true, because then the user would not be able to change the user ID. And then an entry that is showing the selected username, and then the user can now change it and then click update user button in order to update the username. Let's just open it and see how the user interface looks like now before we update the code as well. That's our new user interface. Now I click get users here, then when I click here on the list, I want now 11 to be shown here in the user ID and the username Hans here in new username, and then we can change it and click the update user button in order to update that specific user in the database. So then let's start to create some new event handlers. So we have one new event handler for the collection view. I called it users, on users selected. So then I just right click here, go to definition, and this new event handler is created here. And the second one for this new button, update user, on update user clicked, I just right clicked, go to definition, and then these two new event handlers has been created, and you just need to create the necessary code. So let's start with this one. So when we click on the list, we want to show the user ID and the username in these two new text entries. So then I just start by creating a if or something. If, and then I just use this default code. So if a current selection dot first or default like this is a user or something like this, and then if that's true, just remove some part of this auto-generated code. Then we need to put these values that are selected into these new text boxes like this. So then this is for the username entry, and this should be for the user ID. So then we have these two new ones. This is called user ID entry, which is this one, and the other one is called new name entry. which is this one. So here we just need to use this, remove this one, user dot user ID. I need to convert it to a string, like this. And then this new name entry dot text, then I'll just do the same for this one. User dot, and then username, like this. This is already a string, so I don't need to convert it to a string. So basically that should be it. Let's just run the application. So now let's see if it's working. Get users. So I get this list, and when I click here, you see the user ID is shown here, and the name Elvis is shown here. So now when you click here, update user, this information should, so now let's say I change this to Elvis 2 or something. This new username should now be updated in the database when I click on update user. But before that will work, we need to create a new method in our users DB class called update user or something. So let's go to this users DB class in order to create a new method. So here in this users db.cs, here in the bottom, we just need to create this new method. I just copy some pre-made code in order to save some time, like this. So then update user, and then basically use this select statement, update user, set username equals to the new name that we enter, where user ID equals to user ID, which is an input here as part of this update user method. So now the next step is just to use this new method in our code behind file here in main page.xaml.cs. So we put that code in this event handler on update user clicked. So then here you can start by defining a variable for the user ID like this. And since this user ID is an integer and the entry field is a text, so you can just use int, parse it to, and then you have this user ID entry field dot text, like this. So we retrieve the value that are stored in the entry field on the user interface and put it into this variable. And then we do the same for the username. So then string username, and then new name entry, which is this field here, dot text. And this is both are text, so we don't need to parse it to integer or something like this. And now we can just call our new method that we have created here. Just save the code, and then basically just use the same here, but we need to use this users db, so users db dot update user, and then it needs to have this user ID as an argument and username as an argument, like this. So that's it. And when we have updated the user in the database, typically you also want to retrieve an updated list. So we can also put that piece of code here in the bottom to retrieve all the users from the database like this. So let's just run the application. I just stop it and run the application, and hopefully it will work as expected. So this is our user interface. I click get users, I get a list of users. I select this one, which has user ID number 1 and the name Nils. I want to change it to something else, let's say Nils 2 or something. Click update user, and then you see it actually updates with the new name. So the database is updated with the new name, and then when we save it, we also retrieve an updated list with users like this. So now we have create functionality here, we have read functionality here, and we have update functionality here. So finally, or the last part of this CRUD functionality is to delete one of these users from the list. So let's start on the final part of this CRUD operation, namely delete data from the database. So basically, in order to do that, we need to create a new method in our class, usersDB class. Call it delete user or something, in order to be able to delete a user from the database. So then let's go to usersdb.cs, and here in the bottom we can create this new method. I just copied the code to save some time. Basically this delete user, actually delete from user, where we specify the username we want to delete like this. And now go back to the user interface. Now we need to create a new button to delete the user. So I just copy the previous one, and instead of update user I just call it delete user, and on delete users clicked, which is the event handler. So then I just right click, go to definition, and it is created automatically here in the code behind file, like this. And then we also need to retrieve this user ID, so I just copy this piece of code, and then instead of calling this one, we need to call this new method that we created like this. So instead of this one, call this delete user method, and the input to this method is this user ID like this. And when we delete a user, we also want to update this collection view. So I just copy this one and put it here in the bottom. So basically that's the event handler for deleting a new user when we click on this delete button like this. Now hopefully when we run the application, we will have the full application working with CRUD functionality. So here you see the final application. We have save user, get users, update user, and delete users. So then click get users, then we will get the list of all the users from the database. Now I want to test the delete user functionality, so then I select this one, and this information pops up here. I click just delete user, and then you see it is deleted from the list. So I just start to delete some of the users here. So now we have only these users left, like here. So now we have 3 users in the system. I can click get users to get this list, but I can also create a new one. So let's create a new user now, call it Elvis. Click save user, and then you see it's updated here in the list. And when I select one of the users, the user ID and the username is presented here. I can change it to something else. Click update user, and the user will be updated in the database, and the updated list will be presented here. So basically this is a basic .NET MAUI application with CRUD functionality. It inserts data in this SQLite database, it retrieves data, and it updates data, and it also deletes data from the database. So let's summarize. We have created a basic user app in .NET MAUI, which is a framework where you use Visual Studio and C# in order to create apps for Android and iOS or iPhone platform. This user app has CRUD functionality, where we are using this SQLite database, and we are able to create new users, get a list of existing users from the database. We can update an existing user, and we can also delete a user. Of course, there are lots of improvements to be made in this application. First of all, you should improve the graphical user interface, make it more intuitive. Of course, improve the code structure, etc. But that's up to you. So that's all for now. So thank you and goodbye.